All right. I think we're going to kick everyone off now. We will do a quick round of introductions for those of you who don't know everyone here on the call. I'm Dan Havermail. I lead our marketing and revenue teams here at Fay. And I also have Jason Green with me. Jason, you want to do an introduction for the folks who don't know you
Yes,
yet?
this is Jason Green, president of Fay, and I lead the AI practice here at Fay. Excited to come on and speak with you all.
Great. So just go over a few guidelines first. This is the first one of these that we're doing. We're going to be doing these monthly moving forward. We're going to send out the transcript, all the questions that everyone submitted beforehand. So appreciate if you did have time to submit questions beforehand, you'll have a whole nother month to submit them again. And then we're going to try to keep this interactive. So feel free to turn your video on if you'd like. If you don't like, you can also just, if you want to be really shy, you can just type questions in the chat. Or if you want to raise your hand via the little hand button at the bottom of the screen, you can actually speak your question if you'd like as well. We're going to be keeping track of everything there, and we're going to do a nice write-up at the end on everyone's questions as part of that. If you do have a deeper question from Jason's answer and you want a little more information, feel free to pile on and ask follow-up questions, things like that as well. So to kick us off, we are going to go through the first question that we had submitted as part of that here, which is, I'll pull my notes here. Too many tabs. All right, Jason. So what is the biggest mistake companies make when they first try to implement AI generally?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's also something that executives at a variety of different organizations have asked me, especially in the last couple weeks. I think the biggest mistake companies make when they first try to implement AI is not having an overarching strategy and posture for what they want to do with their AI journey. And what I mean by that is AI is more than just a technology. It's more than just a platform or a tactical action that takes place. It's affecting the organization as a whole. It affects the very nature of work. And so it has to be thought of like, how is this going to affect the team? How does this affect culture? A lot of people are afraid of losing their jobs, and so that has to be addressed as well. So having a strong strategy and posture is what I would always recommend as a first step.
Strong strategy and posture. Okay. And then we have another question that was submitted as well. If I, as an executive at a company, have a theoretical use case that seems like it would benefit AI involvement, where do I start in figuring out what AI tool or service is a good fit?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think one of the interesting things as a business leader, as an executive, someone who manages a team, you're always kind of taught you should delegate everything as much as you can. And I think the thing with AI is that first and foremost, you need to understand what AI does. And that requires education. And I would really start first with making sure you yourself are certified and trained and you're doing experimentation with AI. And then also your team then has education as well. Because then from there, you'll be able to experiment with different tools and different media. But I would start first with education as a first step.
It's great, Jason. So you're saying essentially, you need to be able to kind of speak the language before you're able to get a little deeper in the understanding and things like that. How would folks go about getting themselves educated?
Yeah, so I think speaking language is key. Using different modalities of AI. And so what I mean by that is, look, go out and make a movie. Okay, like 30 seconds long. Well, what do I mean by this? Well, okay, so you've got different tools. You have Sora and Runway where you can make video and stitch it together where the character universe stays the same. You can use GPT, you can use Mid Journey, for example, for the image creation. You can create storyboards with Claude or ChatGPT. And I'd recommend, you take a weekend and you use these different tools to do these different pieces and then stitch them all together. Because the more that you're doing things like this, the more you're going to understand, okay, so this is how the AI is thinking about it. Because it's kind of like this quasi-human thing. So it's almost like I always like to say it's like an 11-year-old who's like really smart and learns really quick, but still is an 11-year-old. And the more you're using these different modalities, the more you're starting to understand, okay, so this is how it differs from if I was just telling an intern or someone in my company to do something. And so I think using those different modalities is key. I think there's a lot of great tools out there. One of them we work with is called Section AI, and that has online courses. That has something called Prof AI, which is an agentic kind of education teacher. And so those are some good places to start.
That's great. Using AI to teach AI, which is great because that can get really hyper personalized, right?
Well, yeah, totally. It can get much more personalized, especially for industry and use case and role and even you can personalize the education around your background, right? I mean, you
Skill
could meet
level.
it who you are, how technical you are versus not, like what kind of things you understand. And even within how technical you are you like a engineer and like hardware manufacturing versus software? Are and it can kind of talk and use analogies that you're going to most likely understand.
Great. Okay. Next question we had is someone just kind of wanted a general pulse, not on necessarily folks in leadership, but what are the kind of growing feelings around AI in the workplace? Is that excited, concerned, other? What are you seeing today?
Yeah, I think it really depends. I think there's definitely a fear among workers that they're going to lose their job. And I think, look, Amazon just announced, I think it was yesterday or the day before, they're laying off 14,000 people because now they're using AI more. Now, what I've been telling companies is there's kind of a couple different things going on. I think if you're a large enterprise with 10,000 employees, 5,000 employees, 15,000, 20,000 employees, there's going to be job cuts. You just don't need 500 people to do, one particular role that AI can turn 500 into 12. Okay? I think that's one part of this. I think for mid-market and SMB, like the small companies, mid-market, I think there's actually an insanely amazing opportunity. I think if you're a company that has 50 or 100 employees or 200 or even 500 employees, I think there's a huge opportunity with AI to make everybody a superhero. And what I mean by that is that you know, and this I just had a conversation a couple of days ago with a construction company about this is like, okay, they have 100 employees and now they're thinking, well, with AI, instead of us on our hire, needing to go to 300 employees to hit our growth goals, maybe we're going to stay around 100. Maybe we're going to only go to 110 or 120. And that means each of your staff is going to become a superhero. They're going to be able to do 3 times as much or 2 to 3 times as much potentially. And so that's a different thing. And that's a cultural thing. And I think that's something when it comes to the change management, you have to lean into so that everyone understands, hey, the company's investing in me, the company's investing in these tools, and I'm going to become this kind of superhero within the organization. And so I think that's really important. And that's why I mentioned the strategy and posture are really critical. Because if you just come into this and start implementing and doing things with AI without like a clear picture of where you're going, and if that is not clear to the staff, there's going to be a lot of resistance because you don't necessarily have the ability. You can do some things top down, like, but I think with AI, a lot of it's bottom up. Like you really need the individuals at the leaf nodes, everybody, you need everybody really buying into it and believing that it's important for them to do. Otherwise, that resistance is going to really reduce the effectiveness of implementing AI because it's such a big shift.
Awesome. It's great. It's a great recap there. Okay. Let's break it up here and we'll do our first one that we got from the chat. Again, please do not be shy. Submit any question that you have inside of the chat as well. Jason, could you please maybe talk a little bit about some of the advantages and disadvantages you're seeing of using closed frontier models like Claude, ChatGPT, and Grok versus open LLMs like Llama and DeepSeek and the thousands of other open source models that are out there today?
Yeah, it's a real interesting question. And I think a lot of this comes down to control and security and compliance. And depending on the industry you're in, depending on the scope of what you're trying to accomplish. For example, if you're let's say you have 1,000 salespeople and you really want to build out this huge knowledge graph, this your own kind of LLM, this augmented LLM, then experimenting with something like Llama, where you can host the model yourself in your own private cloud and build on that, makes a lot of sense to be looking into. One of the things that's kind of a big unknown is where does the cost go from here? Now, it's interesting because, like, in one sense, the costs of the querying become less, technically speaking. Like, as these models evolve, like, just as technology is evolving, it's kind of like costs become less. But the thing is when you're using OpenAI or using Anthropic's models or any of the other ones, we don't really know what they're going to do with their pricing model, right? Like, as it becomes so ubiquitous, they could just decide to, jack their price up 20x for the same query. Now, I wouldn't, what I just said matters in certain scenarios depending on the scope and scale of what you're doing. But from a starting out, and experimenting and proof of concepts, and even rolling out production stuff, starting with the models that you're not hosting yourself, for example, is super fast, super easy, and honestly where I would start, because you can build out the orchestration and agentic infrastructure, and then you could always go and change these models out into a closed in one of the models like Llama, for example, later. So I wouldn't get too wrapped up in what I just said in terms of, oh, we have to start with it in a private cloud. I don't think you do. Unless you have certain compliance stuff. I mean, there is certain stuff within banking that there's just certain restrictions, but
Yeah. So you're saying if you have heavy security restrictions, then maybe going that way. But initially to start,
I think it's parallel. Because, like, even in a banking scenario, there's a lot of banking data, like prospect data. There's certain sales and marketing data that just isn't it doesn't require the same amount of compliance as other parts of the data. And so that's actually a really good place to understand as a leadership team is, what data that we have fits what requirement. Because if you just treat everything as Fort Knox, like, you're just not, it's going to be really hard to get anywhere with this.
makes a lot of sense. Okay. Next question we have submitted in. Should we start with one department or try to roll out AI across the entire organization all at once?
That's a good question. I would typically say to start company wide. Make sure you have your strategy and posture figured out company wide. I would do a workshop with the executive team. Now, where I would maybe not, the only time I would not do that is if you're really big and you're like an enterprise organization. Let's say you have 5,000 employees, then that's not going to be necessarily practical. You could start in a business unit, and even then, you're going to have, quite a bit going on. Um, the other time you might want to start, say, just in sales and marketing is an appetite question, right? Because a lot of this comes down to first and foremost, like, what do you believe about what's happening? And so if you have executives that think this is a nothing burger or just think it's kind of like overblown or just a technology change, they just might not be as apt to do something versus other business units or departments who are really into this and see the change. And so, in that scenario, you might start with just a couple departments.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Moving on to our next question, which is around probably something on top of everyone's mind. There's a lot of spending happening right now in the AI space. Folks are investing in a lot of different tools and a lot of different areas of AI. What is a realistic timeline to see actual ROI from an AI investment or implementation?
I'm going to answer that and say 30 days or less. Because the thing with this is, at least how we're approaching this is in a very, very agile way. Now, what do I mean by that? So like if we think about traditional technology projects, you implement a CRM, you implement an ERP. It takes a long time. If you get 80% of the way there with an ERP, you have nothing. You get 90%, you have nothing. AI is a little different. Like you go and you identify some processes that have specifically, you can measure the cost, you can measure potential ROI. And let's say you have something like, oh, look, I think we could save, $300,000 if we used AI on this process. Well, here's the thing. You might not get all the way through it. You might only be able to get 50% and stop, and then you still save 150 grand. But my point about the 30 days is that you can and should pick things that are pretty like small, like bite-sized pieces to tackle. And so you can see ROI pretty quickly if you're approaching it right.
Okay, that's great. Um, what would you say is the difference of a successful AI pilot or AI POC getting started versus one that's kind of destined to fail?
Well, that's a good kind of follow on to the previous thing is, can you measure the results? So if you it's easier to be successful if you can measure the results, and so if it is actually working and how much time is being saved. Now that's very objective. There are some projects that are quite a bit more subjective. So I'll give you an example is, if you have, for example, you might be presenting to your clients with presentations and you want to implement AI to make each presentation more tailored to the client. That can that's a little more subjective. I mean, you might look at your win rates later down the line and see that they've improved, but you can't necessarily causate that directly from that. Um, which is why I think in general it's just important that even when you're doing that, keep it in small, agile sprints so that you can see the results. In terms of a project destined to fail, I mean, if you can't measure it, it's going to be a problem. If you don't have buy-in, so like if you're like, oh, sales team or marketing team or finance team, here you need to do X or we're doing Y, and you could build out an agent, you could build out this agentic framework, and you can do it all. But if the staff doesn't use it, either because they don't know how, hence lack of education, or they don't want to, or don't believe they should. Maybe they think they're going to be scared for their job, or they don't believe this is good. That gets into the change management, is then you're going to have problems there. And so that's why the education is important for everyone. That's why having a strategy and posture of how you're managing the cultural change and the change management is critical as well. Because someone might, you're gonna be like, AI, we're gonna do X, Y, Z, and then the staff's like, oh, okay, yeah, but like there's a lot of them they're just scared, but they might not say anything. I mean, they're seeing what's happening in the media. I mean, they watch TV, they see it, and so they're scared, and so a lot of people are gonna be quite resistant, even when they're not saying they're resistant. They're still resistant.
Yeah, yeah, it can be under the surface, and I like like you said, the old adage is you can't measure it, you can't track it, you can't improve it. So that makes a lot of sense when we roll things out early. Okay. Oh, we got another question from our chat here. So there's a lot of focus on LLMs in general, and AI has actually been around for quite a while now. And there's a lot of other areas inside of AI besides purely looking at the LLMs. How does one learn about non-LLM tools?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm gonna bring something up here real quick. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to kind of bring this slide up. I think this is really, really useful for people. So first of all, when it comes to how do you learn about LLMs versus not LLMs, I think the education piece is going to be hugely helpful of getting that type of education. And then my point about the different modalities is when you start using these different tools, you're going to start understanding how this all fits in. These LLMs, which I have down here at the bottom, understanding what a knowledge graph is. So that's important to understand that, and understanding how even within the LLMs, like if you're, let's say you're using GPT, go use Claude, go use Gemini, go use Perplexity, then go use the project features inside these tools. Understand how those project features function. Really try to make use of the tools, because the LLMs, the underlying models, is just like if you go get a subscription to Claude or GPT or Gemini, the LLM's underneath. Like there's this layer of tools kind of sitting above it. Like make sure you understand it, and then understand how retrieval augmented generation works. And start to explore the various orchestration layer and then the user interface. So like there's all these kind of pieces where the LLM's kind of just at the bottom. And I think if you start with some education and you start with really getting familiar with the different subscriptions available by the LLM providers, like that's a really great way to get started. The other interesting thing is like when there's so many different tools out there, because it's just like a million tools, and a lot of these tools, I see these tools like, oh, rewrite your emails or do your brand, or you know a sales automated agent. A lot of these things, like they're just sitting on top of these LLMs, and the user interface just has a couple buttons. So I think like as you're starting, as you run across the myriad of tools out there in the marketplace, start to look and ask questions to the provider like, hey, like what LLM is this sitting on? Like what is the architecture? And just the more that you can understand how even those tool sets are architected. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to become an engineer. I'm not suggesting you need to write code or understand that, but like I think you can, regardless of your technical aptitude, like you can understand what the blueprint is for these AI platforms. Much in the same way you inherently understand when you walk in a house, there's a kitchen, there's a bathroom, there's a living room, there's stairs to go upstairs. Like you should learn and start to understand this. The other thing I'll say on the tools, which I didn't mention before, is digital avatars and audio cloning. So one of the things we've been doing, and we've been doing it with clients, and we do it ourselves, is cloning voice, cloning video, and creating avatars, digital avatars that have really interesting use. We use HeyGen. We're partnered, agency partner of HeyGen, and you can make your own avatars. You can do podcasting with 11 Labs, and there's just a lot of really interesting voice and video things that I would also recommend to start playing around with. I think hopefully that answers that question somewhat. It's kind
It
of a big
does.
question, so.
It does. Um, okay, next question we have is culturally, um, what are the things you can do to ready your organization culturally for some of the changes that AI brings on? And what are some of the things you shouldn't do as you're kind of going through some of these transitions and implementing some of these things?
So I think if you have so someone in your company is sitting in the chief AI strategy officer seat. And one of the things that we've done is we did a couple of things here. Let's go here. So this is like a letter that we have that goes out internally to staff, externally to partners, vendors, alliances, externally to clients and prospects. And why is this important? Because when it comes to your staff culturally, you really want to show, hey, we are investing in you. We are investing in AI to make you a superhero. And so part of that change management is, hey, we're going to be doing some workshops. We are investing in section school, for example. We're investing in the tools. There's various LLM wrappers. We have our own agent portal that we've built that kind of wraps all these LLMs. We're investing in the tools. We're investing in the education for you, our staff. And I think if you open with that, however, whatever formulation you do, that is going to, I think, put people at ease. It's gonna put people at ease, and it's going to disarm people a bit to be like, okay, okay, maybe I'm not gonna get fired. Like maybe this is actually really good for me, because you need everybody to feel that it's good for them so that they really embrace it. Because you can't really force people to use the AI. I mean, you can to a degree, right? Like stick versus carrot, but to really get it cooking, like you need individuals stepping up to the plate on their own, trying to do things with AI.
That makes a lot of sense. More carrot than stick. I'm gonna have them bought in.
Yeah.
Um, Similar question that was also submitted in. What skills should we be developing for the team to work effectively along AI? And do we need to hire a specialist, or can we train the existing team to support what we're doing?
I think you can definitely train the team for quite a bit of it. It's interesting. Do you hire a specialist? Well, in many ways, this is really new. So it's like, what does even a specialist mean? I think what you do need to make sure of is somebody at the executive team owns the transformation. Someone is pushing the ball forward. Someone is accountable on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, to make sure as a leadership it is moving forward. Because it doesn't matter if you hire someone who's an AI specialist, a director of AI. Like if there's not ownership at the top level, it's going to be really tough to make a lot of make a lot of progress. I'm not saying don't hire a specialist or someone who can drive some of the programs, but the overarching strategy and the overarching how this kind of permeates organizationally, someone at the executive team needs to own it.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Next question. what is one AI use case that almost every business could benefit from right now?
I mean, I think one of the most basic ones is a marketing one around branding and voice. And I mean, the ability to make an agent that understands the brand and thus the brand voice, I think is a super easy one. I think it's one then across the organization when people are within marketing, when you're creating content. I think when sales team, when anyone's creating content, you can run that content through that brand voice to make sure it's always consistent with the brand and how the brand speaks and the tone and everything else. I think that's a real easy one.
Okay, that's great. Um, the same questions. I'm sure it's kind of a how high is up question, but how much does a meaningful AI implementation and transformation typically cost? Well, I guess it's two separate ones for a mid-sized organization.
Yeah. So what I would do is I would set aside about $100,000 for the mountain. That doesn't mean you're starting with spending $100,000, but I would set that aside as an initial budget for going on this journey on the mountain. Um, and along the way, you're going to see returns. So, like I mentioned about the ERP or other projects, it's not like you have to get to the end to see returns. You're going to see returns along the way. Otherwise, you're not going to spend all that 100,000. But that's what I would suggest.
Okay. And then we got a kind of follow-up question to our previous question, kind of around training and specialists. When is kind of the right time to bring in a third party to help implement an AI project?
I would say in the beginning, I would say as soon as possible to help really drive what's going on across the org. Let me restate this. So if a third party like Faye is going to come in, we're going to do a workshop, we're going to identify low hanging fruit, we're going to create some projects, and then we can help implement those projects. We can help be a fractional AI strategy officer and drive things forward. Um, but there has to be before that, you have to be set as an executive team like, hey, we want to embark on an AI journey. We believe this is important. Um, you might do what we would do in a workshop yourself, so that might already take place internally, and then you need us to come in for specific projects. But I think in the beginning is important. I think, you know, there's so much with this happening. It's whether you believe, for us, we believe it's at least 1994. It's like the pre-internet, and it's like this dawn of this kind of new age. Some people believe it's more like 1882, which is the first time homes were wired with electricity in the United States. Okay, I say, look, if it's anywhere between those two, anywhere along that spectrum, it's pretty big. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because the sense I have, the sense I'm seeing with other leaders of organizations is it's like no matter what they're doing with AI, they should be doing more. So you should be having as much help as you possibly can at this juncture.
Especially as it's formulating. Okay, great. Um, on that note, similarly, what are some of the biggest differences between some of the AI hype that's out there and actual business value, and how do we invest as much as possible while avoiding some of the AI hype and actually deliver business value to the organization?
So that I can answer that a few different ways. I think first is like from a overall this hype around AI is going to replace everybody. You don't need humans, and it's just going to do everything. And then it's going to be like the Jetsons. So I think no matter what you're implementing with AI, especially when you're using it as thought leadership or to do tasks, like if you're a law firm and you're having it write briefs and stuff like that, it's like you still, just like you would with staff, junior staff, you need someone to oversee what's going on. So yes, it helps, but it's not a replacement for managing the work in the sense that you still have to, review it and make sure it's right. I think the other piece of the hype is kind of one of the other questions about like the tools. There's so many different tools and so much technology, and I would experiment with different things. Um, but I'd be careful about long-term subscribing, or I'd be careful about subscribing to software for long-term contracts right now with this because the stuff is just shifting so quickly. Now, fortunately, most of this is kind of month to month. You don't necessarily need annual contracts, which is nice because you can kind of get in and out without having to make huge investment. So that's kind of my two thoughts around that. And then just kind of start small with agilely, like start with very identifiable processes and just start with different bits and see where you get.
So don't lock yourself into a massive 5-year contract because the space is moving so quickly that you're going to feel kind of trapped in that investment you've made. So make some more nimbler investments. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Yes.
Okay. Um, okay, this is an interesting question. When should a company not invest in AI?
Hmm. That's a real interesting question. I don't know if I've ever really gotten that. I think that I think if you don't have any buy-in, I don't think you should invest in AI yet. Like if your executive team thinks this is all overblown and nonsense, if everybody is just not believing this is important, I don't know how you would successfully invest in AI. Because even if you invested in education, like there's these underlying beliefs that would be a little difficult to overcome, I think. I mean, maybe in that scenario, so maybe I'll kind of say like tangentially to that. If there's like one person or two people in the company and they're really like, this is going to change everything, then I would probably just invest for those two people or one person, let them go to town. And then if when it works, then you'll start to get some converts in other parts of the org. That's what I would say.
That makes sense. So if you're going to face heavy resistance and a high chance of failing, get the buy-in first, or start really small with the folks that are bought in.
Yeah, and then just start converting people along the way until you have some sort of critical mass. I
It's
think,
another good
yeah.
question from the live audience as part of this too. How do you recommend finding and then evaluating? I imagine, especially if you don't have necessarily the background or all of the education, finding AI project consultants.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely could turn to a recruiter who has been recruiting for these type of roles. I'd probably consider that. Um, Another easy answer for me is if we're in there as the fractional AI strategy lead, we can help evaluate for those roles. So that's one thing. If you have an advisory board or other advisors that are technologists or people that are in this space and understand it, you can turn to them to help you evaluate it. And of course, you could use AI to create the job role and help evaluate kind of what questions you want to ask and who you're kind of looking for. Um, I think when you're really looking for someone, like are they approaching things kind of differently? Are they talking about things differently than usual? That's kind of a big part of it.
Okay. That's great for definitely for finding internal resources you're hiring. I think the question was also geared a little bit about how do you find external AI project consultants to come assist, and how do you evaluate them if you're looking at a number of different consultants to come help you externally.
Well, I would take a look at what other projects they've done. Like what are they doing with AI internally for themselves as a consulting company. I would kind of look at what they're doing and what their background is and kind of use that to help evaluate. I'd also, I would just try to understand how innovative the person or company is. So that's I guess that's kind of an interesting way to think about this. So this is cutting edge. A lot of this is super cutting edge. I mean, we've had conversations about reviving dead people, digital clones of dead people, preserving people who are about to die. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's cutting edge. And so I think you want a consultant or a consulting company, right? Because you might be hiring an individual person. You want innovation. You want someone who is at the bleeding edge and like thinking about the frontier and working with these frontier tools and experimenting. Um, I think that's really, really important. That's the type of personality, that's the type of team and culture you need for this because it's so cutting edge and it's changing so rapidly. I think it's different than I don't know. It's a little different than if you're like, hey, we're doing a new ERP or CRM. So like your evaluation for how you're bringing on staff or a third party consulting firm is one way. I think it's still maybe mostly the same on the underlying like credentialing and like how experienced are they and this general stuff. But I think the innovation is really, really important on the AI side.
Okay. That's great advice. Okay. I think we got time for one more question here. So if anyone has any last minute ones in the chat they want to submit, feel free to get them in. If not, we'll go to one of our pre-submitted questions here. All right. What are some of the biggest operational changes that folks need to make prior to investing and implementing AI?
In terms of operational changes, I think back to the security compliance, understanding how the IT infrastructure, how that fits in. And so if you want to implement a new tool or you want to do some sort of agentic framework, like making sure you understand the flow internally for the approvals and everything so that you can actually do the experimenting. So I think just having a really easy way to be like, hey, I want to try this tool, get it approved and try it. I think that's really important because there's a lot of things, different things you have to do. And so that's probably where I would start operationally, honestly. It's just making sure you're set up. Because otherwise you're like, oh, I want to try to do a video on Runway. And it's like you've got all, like it takes you a month just to get approved to try this tool where you're not even using any customer data and you're just screwing around. Like that's frustrating. That's not going to help you.
Great. Now that makes a lot of sense. Okay. With that, we can wrap it up. If you guys joined late or someone left early, we're gonna wrap all this up, send out a few clips as well as the entire recording using some of our AI tools internally. But Jason does things like this quite a bit for organizations in general. So if you want one-on-one time with Jason or to have him do more of an AMA style for your executive team, it's not an uncommon ask on our side here as well. So hopefully everyone here found this valuable. Feel free to send your feedback. We'll be sending out a brief survey after this as well. And we'll see you all next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Hopefully this was useful. Thanks.